Namaste. I want to talk about Jerusalem. The war which is happening right now in West Asia or Middle East has a lot to do with the mythology of Jerusalem. I know people think it is all rational, it is about energy, it is about oil, it is about Palestine. But underlying this is a mythological story which is over 3,000 years old. Something that rational minds and scientific minds want to deny. But the fact is, people are mobilized by belief systems. Belief systems are real for the insider and false for the outsider. So if you really want to understand what's going around in the world, you have to understand the belief system of people who are at war right now. You have the Jewish people on one side, you have Christians on one side, you have Muslims on another side, you have Shia Muslims, you have Sunni Muslims, you have Zionists, you have liberal Jews, you have got Christians who are Catholics, Protestants, Pentecostals. There are a whole bunch of people involved in this narrative that nobody is talking about. And it is important to understand a little bit about biblical mythology that is shaping this war. And it will shape this war no matter how much you try to deny it. First, when the word God is used by Jewish, Christian, and Islamic people, it is very different from the way the word God is used in India. So in India, we use the word Bhagavan, Ishwar. Now, we mean as God as something which is inside us. It is linked with the concept of Atma. And of course, politicians are trying to make it sound like the Jewish God or the Christian God or the Islamic God. But there is a foundational difference. In biblical mythology, God creates the world. You live only once. You have to live your life correctly. When you die, after death, on Judgment Day, it will be decided whether you have followed God's rule and therefore should go to heaven, or you should go to hell because you have broken God's rule. You can seek God's mercy because God is merciful, but that is the biblical mythological structure. That is not the Hindu structure. God doesn't create the world. At best, you have God sleeping, and when he wakes up, the world awakens, and a lotus blooms out of Vishnu's navel, which is Brahma, who creates all the world. But we do not worship the creator Brahma. So it's another story. It is related to rebirth. Rebirth is the foundation of Hindu mythology, while Judgment Day is the foundation of biblical mythology. And biblical mythology shapes Jewish traditions, Christian traditions, Islamic traditions. And we must understand this. There are many people who think that the word mythology is only used for Hinduism. These are people who are not very educated. The word mythology is used by scholars around the world for belief systems, which are presented through stories. And they're not fixed stories. They keep shifting over space and time. So let's begin with the mythology of Jerusalem in the Jewish world. Now, for the Jewish people, the creation in the rabbinic traditions, creation began in Jerusalem. The Dome of the Rock, where right now the Al-Aqsa mosque is located, is the spot, they say, where creation began. That is where the dust was taken with which the first human being, Adam, was created. So it's a very important site in the Jewish traditions. Now, they also believe that this is the place where Abraham was asked by God to sacrifice his son Isaac to check how much of a believer Abraham is. Abraham offers his son, and at the last minute, this act is stopped by God, who sends a goat, a male goat, or a male ram. So Bakra Eid is in commemoration of this incident in the Muslim world. Ram being sent in place of humans. God is saying that, humans can die if God wills it, but God sends food to prevent us from dying. So there is this relationship of God and Abraham, and a covenant is made, a contract. Covenant means a contract is made that I believe in God. And this idea is very strong in the Jewish world. So the story is linked to the creation. The story is linked to Abraham sacrificing his son and proving that he is a believer in God and he's willing to follow God's law. Then there is the story of Jacob's ladder. This is the spot where one of the patriarchs or one of the founders of Jewish faith, Jacob, had slept and had dreamt of a ladder that connects earth with heaven, and he saw angels going up and down. So it's related to connection, direct connection with heaven from Jerusalem. That's another story. Then the Jewish king David builds the first temple, or he tries to build the first temple, is unable to do it. So his son Solomon builds the first Jewish temple at Jerusalem. So the first temple of Jerusalem, 3,000 years ago, it is believed. Now, are they historical figures? We are not sure. But the Jewish people believe that Solomon built the first temple. In Islam, Solomon is referred to as Suleiman. David is referred to as Dawood. So Moses is referred to as Musa. So the same prophets are, the name is pronounced differently in the Persian traditions, the Arab traditions, and the Muslim traditions. So in Jewish mythology, 3,000 years ago, this temple was built. 2,500 years ago, this temple was broken by the Assyrians, and the Jewish people were exiled to Babylon, and they returned around 2,400 years ago with the help of the Emperor Cyrus, the Persian king, who allowed the second temple to be built, which was then destroyed 1,900 years ago by Romans. So that's the story of the broken temple. So the Wailing Wall, you will always hear the story. When you go to Jerusalem, there is the Wailing Wall where Jewish people remember the second temple being broken, and they hope that the third temple will one day be built. Now hold on to that thought, because that's very important. This third temple of the Jewish people in Jerusalem. Now, this is the Jewish part of the story. Now, let's go to the Christian part of the story. The Christians believe Jesus lived 2,000 years ago. He visited Jerusalem as a child. This is where he visited the temple. He debated with scholars at the temple. He cleansed the temple of money changers who were using Roman coins. And they were trying to, this whole giving coins, and Roman coins were being used in the temple, and they were being exchanged for Jewish coins because they should not have the image of a man. The story of the money changers is linked with Jerusalem and specifically the temple. And finally, of course, this is where Jesus had his last supper. This is where he was crucified. This is where he was buried, and he resurrected himself after 3 days. So Jerusalem is very, very important to the Christian world, because this is the spot where the magic happens. Jesus dies and is resurrected, and this proves that Jesus is not a human but the Son of God, as per Christians are concerned. Jewish people do not accept Jesus as the Messiah. The Christians, of course, are very clear. Jesus is not just the Messiah, but the Son of God. Now, this happens around 2,000 years ago, but Christianity was not a very powerful religion until 1,700 years ago, when the Romans themselves become Christian. And that is the time when Christianity becomes a political lever, and the Romans use Christianity to establish political control, and they wipe out all non-Christian pagan cults in the region. Then 1,400 years ago, you have Islam emerging. Now, Islam emerges in Arabia. It is Mecca, which is on the western coast, so near the Red Sea. That's Mecca. And that is where Islam is located. Then how does Jerusalem become important to the Muslims? Because as per the Muslims, one night, the Prophet sat on a flying horse which came from the heavens, and he was taken in one night from Mecca to Jerusalem, to heaven, where he engaged with the prophets, he engaged with God. He figured out how Islam should be followed on earth by human beings, and he came down with the laws of God. So this journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, to heaven, happened in one night on a flying horse, and it's a very important story. And this point from where he traveled to heaven was called the Al-Aqsa, the farthest mosque, and Muslims believed that spot is in Jerusalem. And therefore that becomes an important Muslim shrine also. So you realize these are all mythological stories. For the Jewish people, the spot of creation, the spot where Abraham tried to sacrifice Isaac, the spot where Jacob's ladder appeared, the spot where the temple of Solomon was built, the second temple was built. That is for the Jewish people. For the Christians, it is a spot where Jesus died and was resurrected. For Muslims, it is a spot where the prophet traveled on a flying horse on one night and went to heaven. So it's a very important site for all three. Now, this story doesn't end here. It gets even more interesting. Now, the Christians did not like the Jewish people because they said it is the Jews who killed Jesus Christ. They are Christ killers. And throughout European history, the Jews were persecuted, not allowed to own land in European countries. So this friendship with Israel is a new phenomena. It's an important thing to remember. The Christians never ever liked the Jews for a very, very long time. The history of anti-Semitism starts with Christians. It has nothing to do with Muslims. The Muslims' stories were that they were the people of the book. We have to find ways of working with them. Of course, there was a lot of rivalry, political rivalry, but you don't see a hatred for Jews except in certain sections where the prophet felt that the Jews were not supporting them. And there is these little stories over here, but generally it is seen that anti-Semitism was more in the Christian side and less in the Muslim side. I mean, these are details which historians keep arguing about. But then something shifts. You see, when America is discovered and Christians migrate to America, in America, a new form of Christianity emerges, which is called the new born-again Christianity, Pentecostal Christianity. These are charismatic preachers who relook at the Bible, read the Bible literally, and come up with new ideas about how Jesus will be resurrected, the second coming of Jesus, where all true Christians will physically rise to heaven, and that's called the rapture. Now, so one has to differentiate between European Christians and American Christians. Section of those, of course, not everybody. But the European Christians are the old Catholics and the Protestants, and, they are the people who treated Jews very badly. And then when in the American version, it's slightly different. Now, the American Christians believe that in order for Jesus to resurrect himself and rescue and take all the good Christians to heaven, Israel has to be established and all the Jews have to gather in Israel, and only then Jesus' second coming will happen. Then the final war that ends all war will happen between God and the devil. It is called the apocalypse. It is going to happen. Jesus is going to come down and fight and destroy all the non-believers. And therefore, the state of Israel is very, very important to exist. And so in America, you have two lobbies right now. One which supports Israel and says it has not only should exist, but all Jews should live there. And a third temple of Solomon has to be built so that Jesus can come down and rescue all the true Christians. So that's the American school. The European school doesn't like this idea and doesn't believe in these kind of concepts. And so you'll find these two lobbies in America. And you have, on this side, you have the Muslims talking about Jerusalem is as important to the Muslims as Mecca is. And therefore, Jerusalem is a holy site for Muslims. And that is what Iran, in a way, seeks. It needs access, because Mecca is where all the Muslims gather. And all the Muslims gather, and that is an important site. But if Jerusalem comes under control, that is also an important Muslim site, a pilgrim site. That makes it important for the Muslim world. So now you have this complicated story of Jerusalem, which is important to the Jewish people. It is important to the Christians. It is important to the American Christians who want the end of the world to happen. And the end of the world idea is common in Jewish traditions, Christian traditions, Islamic traditions, that finally one day God, Son will come down, the angels will come down, and they will fight the devil, they'll fight the demons, the world will come to an end, and all the true believers will live forever in heaven. Now, this idea is not there in India, but it is a very powerful idea. And you will find many Indian politicians talking about dharma yuddha and about fighting the final battle to save Hindus. This really ideas come from the idea of the apocalypse. And apocalypse, again, is going to happen in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is a very important mythological idea that shapes the destinies of West Asia, Europe, and America. And that's the underlying story of the war.